topic is, or maybe we do, who knows. So the next topic is instrument kernels, IKs. So instrument kernel serves as a repository, as a bucket for instrument-specific geometry information useful within SPICE context. While applicable, that always included in the iKernels is a field of view definition of what instrument and detectors. But there are some other possibilities. Timing parameters, optical parameters, detector geometric parameters, optical distortion parameters that would be relevant for computing that instrument observation geometry. Note that mounting alignment that was initially provided in the iKernels in the early versions of SPICE datasets is now in the frames kernel, and it's usually incorporated into the fixed offset frames for those relevant instruments. So iKernel is a SPICE text kernel. You're pretty familiar with this format by now. It would have the identifier characters as the first few characters of the file, KPLIK. Then there would be a set of comments in the top section of the file. There will be a data section with keyword equal value assignments, more comments, more data sections, and so on. Well, here's some examples of iKernel keywords. All iKernel keywords starts with letters INS for instrument, followed by the instrument ID. And then it's just a descriptive string without blanks, of course, and we strongly recommend that all of them are uppercase. In this case, this keyword INS -94031, focal length is the focal length of MGS Mach narrow angle camera. Individual field of view or pixel field of view of max HRC SRC camera would be incorporated into this keyword, and so on. In general, SPICE does not require any specific keywords to be present in the iKernel. It's really for the iKernel creators, people who know an instrument, to decide what these names are going to be and how many keywords are needed for providing enough geometric information for the instrument. The only exception from this is keywords that define instrument field of use. In order for these keywords to be fetched together, or data from them to be fetched together by get field of view routine, all the complete sets of keywords need to be present, and they have to have certain sets of values assigned to them. Well, the requirement for the keywords on the iKernel is the following. All need to start with INS and instrument number. The total length of the keyword cannot be longer than 32 characters. And you always need to remember that keywords in all text kernels are case sensitive. So keyword with uppercase K isn't equal all uppercase keyword. Well, even more than any other kernels, iKernel should contain extensive comments because we don't put many requirements on what keywords should be. So these comments should provide instrument overview, reference sources for data information. They need to list the keywords and talk about name IDs assigned to the instruments and its parts. Explain each keyword included in the file. That's very important because sometimes you abbreviate these tokens that are put in the keyword and it may not be obvious to the future users. If there is a field of view, there should be a description of field of view and detector layout. And when appropriate, you may even include description of algorithms in which these parameters, the parameters provided in the iKernel are used. For example, if there is a set of keywords, there could be a set of formulas that explain how these keywords can be used. And sometimes you may even include little code examples, even for example in C or MATLAB or IDL, that show how to fetch these keywords and how to implement these formulas in that language. These comments exist primarily to assist future users in integrating iKernel data into their applications. You really need to know the keyword name to fetch its value. And you really need to know what units assigned to these keywords and how it should be used with other parameters to compute whatever geometric quantity you want. And you also need to know what the values of these keyword means to use them properly. Well, as with any SPICE kernel, you load iKernels using Furnish. You can just load the individual IKs or include them in the meta kernel. And once you have done that, the data from iKernel gets buffered in the pool structure along with data from all other text kernels. And you can fetch it from that pool structure using routines that can retrieve values of individual keywords. All these routines have this style name, G for get, then the type of data, and pool, get something from pool. In this case, get double precision value from pool, get integer value from pool, or get character value from pool. They have the same calling sequence, you need to give them the name of the keyword, exactly as it appears in the instrument kernel. Then you need to specify from which index, if that keyword is an array, you want to start fetching values and how much room you have in the output array that holds it. And the routine will return the number of elements that it would find, the values of these elements, and a flag indicating whether anything was found or not. Of course, if there is a found flag, you have to check it. If it's false, then all other outputs are undefined. If it's true, then Spice was able to find this keyword, and you can use the values in your future computations. If you have an instrument field of view defined in the ikernel, use a special set of keywords that are described on subsequent slides, with keywords defining the field of view shape, reference frame, bore size vector, and boundary vectors, you can retrieve all of these parameters at once by calling getFieldOfView routine. This routine requires you to give it the instrument ID number, to specify how much room is available in the output array for the bounds vectors, and that would be the number of vectors that can be put into it. And the routine will return a string which indicates shape of the field of view, for example, rectangular or circle, the frame in which bore site and bounds vectors are defined. Most likely it's going to be instrument frame, but it could be some other frame. For example, it's sometimes very convenient to use field of view definitions with dynamic frames, which makes them point at a certain target on a constant basis. The bore site vector that's defined in this frame, the number of boundary vectors that it would find in the ikernel, and the boundary vectors themselves. So now let's talk a bit more about these keywords that we use to define field of views. The keyword defining the shape is field of view shape. Of course, prefix is instrument ins followed by instrument number, and it can be set to circle, ellipse, or rectangle, or polygon. For circle, you need to specify only one boundary vector. For ellipse, two boundary vectors. For semi-major, semi-minor axis. For rectangle, it would be all four boundary vectors, or angular extents, as you will see further. But polygon is a very convenient keyword which you can really fill in with almost any number of vectors. Of course, there is a limit in Spice routines that deal with field of views of how many of these vectors can be buffered. I believe it's set to 100. But with 100 vectors, you really can describe pretty much arbitrary shape field of views, which may be convenient if you wanted to take into account the distorted shape of the field of view because of optical distortion, or field of views that have strange shapes, like triangles, for example, for certain kinds of sensors. The keyword specifying reference frame is just field of view frame, and you assign to it the frame name in which the vectors are defined. The keyword defining bore site is just x, y, z values, defining the direction of that bore site, and the name of the keyword is underscore bore site. The keyword defining boundary vectors could be provided in two ways. The first one is to specify these vectors explicitly. In this case, the keyword FV boundary vectors will simply have an array of boundary vectors that points to the corners of that field of view or through the reference points around that field of view. If this specification is used, then the field of view class keyword is optional. If it's not provided, it will be assumed to be set to corners. The second way of providing angular extents is by defining boundary vectors. Is by providing field of view angular extents, it is possible for circular, elliptical, or rectangular field of views. In this case, this class step keyword has to be present and has to be set to angles. And you need to specify reference vector and reference angle. This reference vector, together with the bore site, will define the plane in which this reference angle will be applied to get a half-angular extent of the field of view. And then you need to specify the cross angle, which will define the second half-angular extent of the field of view, which will be defined in a plane that's rectangular to the first plane. So this way you sort of get two planes and two angular extents. And from that, Spice can compute boundary vectors. So there are a few things to know about field of view definitions. When explicit boundary vectors are provided, the first style of defining them, they must be listed in clockwise or counterclockwise order, not random. You cannot just pick random corners and put them in any order. They have to be going around the bore site. Neither bore site nor reference vectors have to be co-aligned with one of the frame axes in which they're defined. It can be an arbitrary vector in that frame, but sometimes, actually all the time, it's more convenient to align them with an axis. So for example, bore site will be along 0, 0, 1. None of the bore side corner reference vector has to be a unit vector, but they most frequently are because we're talking about directions here, and it's easier to relate to if it's a unit vector. When field of view is specified using half-angular extent method, the bore side and reference vector have to be linearly independent, but they don't have to be perpendicular because you need to be able to build that plane in which these half-extents are going to be applied to find out where the sides of the field of view are. The half-angular extents of a rectangular field of view specify the angles between the bore side and the field of view sides. So really not between the corners, but between the centers. For small field of views, there isn't much distortion because of that, but for larger size field of views, the distortion is significant, and sometimes users of these field of views get confused, saying, hey, how is that I fetch my two vectors for the field of view side, and their extent is not equivalent to what I provided in the I-curve? Well, because the extent you provided is for the centers. So that's how this definition method works. And the next two pages show an example of rectangular field of view. In this case, we're looking at a field of view that emanates from the origin 0, 0, with the bore side along z-axis, the blue vector, and with the corners of the field of view going through these points with the coordinates shown in these parentheses, black parentheses. If you look at projection of this field of view onto the sky, you will see that it has half-angular extent in vertical direction of approximately 14 degrees and in horizontal direction approximately 26 degrees. This extent is in zx plane and this extent is in zy plane. So to specify this field of view, you can use one of the two styles. And for the first style, you simply say that your field of view shape is rectangle. The frame for this field of view is this frame, named with some bogus instrument, with bogus instrument ID. The bore side is along z-axis. Here's 0, 0, 1. And you simply list the boundary vector, in this case, clockwise or counterclockwise, so it doesn't really matter. Or, more conveniently, you can specify this field of view as half-angular extents. In this case, you still say it's a rectangle and specify the same reference frame and the same bore side vector, but you have to provide the field of view class spec keyword and set it to angles. You have to say that the first angular extent will be measured in zy plane, in the vertical plane from the previous diagram. The half-angular extent will be 14 degrees. And the second half-angular extent will be measured in the plane perpendicular to it, that's zx plane, and these half-angular extents will be given in degrees. They can be given in radians, arc minutes, and any number of units supported by SPICE conversion routine. Well, we don't have any utility programs that deal with I-kernels included in the toolkit, but on the website, on the utility page, we have a very convenient utility called Optics. This program will display field of view summary for all field of views defined in the collection kernel files that you give it to this program on the command line, and will print that summary as a convenient table. It also has the ability to print table boundary vectors, and in fact, because you can specify the frame in which this output can be given, you can compute this in any given frame, assuming that you provided enough kernels. For example, if you have a meta kernel, which has leap seconds files, clock files, frames kernel files, C kernel files for the spacecraft on which instrument was mounted, IFK for defining the field of view frame, then you can request this program to print field of view corner directions in the inertial frame. So that's a way of verifying what these directions would be with just a simple command line run. Well, I've always mentioned bingo because we still have some issues with some users having issues converting between Unix and DOS formats, although it's only limited to the Fortran filters. Now, the best way to learn more about I-kernels is to actually examine some of the I-kernels found in the nth node archives, and actually in the ESA website for flight missions and for the archive as well. Here's the URL of our archive page. You can go to many missions and find I-kernels and a set of kernels provided in the data set and simply look at them. You can also look at the online version of this tutorial, which has more examples of field of views, not just rectangular, but also circular and elliptical and polygonal. We don't have yet the iKernel required reading document like we do for all other subsystems, but the header of the get field of view routine provides all the details related to field of view specification in the kernel. So if you really want to know all possibilities that you have for defining field of view, you should look at that header. Of course, kernel required reading describes the format of the kernel file. Optic User's Guide will help you if you wanted to use that program to display field of view bore side and boundary pointer directions, and some other additional tutorials that talk about IDs and porting kernels. Right? Questions? So now I'm going to spend just 5 minutes showing real examples of frames kernel and iKernels. We haven't already looked at some of them as you were doing the previous lesson assignments, but I think that it's important to get used to reading the comments provided in the frames kernel and the iKernels and really treat them as documents, not just like data files, because we make sure that producers who do create these files put a lot of information in their comments intended for the future users of that data.